This is Robert Rocco Cottone, and I'm recording a brief lecture on what's called Radical Social Constructivism. I've been asked by a number of students and others to give a brief introduction to Radical Social Constructivism, and I thought doing a video would be helpful. So I want to talk a little bit about what Radical Social Constructivism means, and a little bit about how it is applied to counseling and psychotherapy. And I also want to talk a little bit about decision making, because I've developed a radical social constructivism model of ethical decision making. First, as an introduction, I am a professor at the University of Missouri in St. Louis, and I have been a professor there for 32 years. I have been most recently a proponent of radical social constructivism and a defender of radical social constructivism, something I call RSC. The presentation I'm going to make here is very brief. It really is going to talk about how this philosophy relates to counseling and psychotherapy, and also to religion and my religious philosophy, which I call belief science. So social constructivism is what we call a postmodern philosophy. And by that we mean that it's all about relationships. When you hear the term postmodern, most typically you hear about relationships. I've made the statement that everything is relationship and relationship is everything. And I truly believe this, and believe this model really opens our eyes to the way the world operates, and especially how humans operate together. So what is it about? Is it about socially constructing a reality or a thing? No, really, it's not about that at all. In fact, I used to use the reality term in the past in some of my writings, and I've tried to stay away from using the term reality in my works most recently, because I think it confuses people. So what we're really trying to construct socially is our understanding of shared experience. So this is a very important distinction, because a lot of people think you can socially construct a brick, you can socially construct a wall. Yeah, that's not what this is about. This is about, again, understanding things through shared meaning. So we socially construct truths through our interaction with others. As an example, consider a knife. Now, we don't socially construct a knife as a thing, but for instance, a group of wood carvers would see a knife quite differently than, for instance, a group of warriors. And so the truth of the knife for the wood carvers is quite different than the truth of a knife to a group of warriors. So what we do is we understand that people come together in groups, and they bracket their truths about what they share together experientially. So it only takes two people to establish a truth, just two. Jesus had John the Baptist. They together established the truth that Jesus was the Messiah. Any two people can establish a truth claim, and I've called these consensualities. That's just a short name for a truth claim. I've used other terms like communities of understanding and pockets of objectivity, those kinds of terms too. The idea is that together two people come to agree to something, and for them it becomes indisputable. So any two people can come together and establish a truth, but not all truths are necessarily good or bad. Consensual truths can be good or bad, but they depend on the larger social legal consensus as to whether they will help people who are believers to exist and persist and endure. So we have to understand that truth claims in and of themselves does not make them useful in a community. And in fact, some truth claims can be very damaging to a community. In 1997, there was a group called Heaven's Gate. It was a religious cult, and 39 people, as I understand, committed mass suicide around the belief systems of Heaven's Gate, the religion, and they apparently were not coerced. So some truth claims can be very damaging and harmful, and others can help us to live and to persist and to endure. So think about the idea that truth claims have some enduring value and that they're not just arbitrary. Think about the 10 Commandments of the Jewish people. The Jewish people have held the 10 Commandments as truth for millennia. So this is not just a passing fancy. A truth claim may or may not get traction among its community members and actually have value in helping them to survive. So religions, as you've heard me mention 2 examples, do help us to understand radical social constructivism, and in fact, it was the factor that helped to convince me that it had some validity within human relations. So each religion essentially represents a truth claim. Each religion has validity within its community of believers. And this is where critics misunderstand. They believe that a consensuality is a relative truth, or that the truth of radical social constructivism itself is held as an absolute, that it holds itself out as the truth. It doesn't really hold itself out as the truth. It holds itself out as one truth among many. And the most relevant competitors in psychology and counseling would be phenomenology and logical positivism, which would be 2 competitive frameworks to radical social constructivism. Now, critics tend to see this approach as relative, and they fail to really understand the idea that social constructivism is off of the relative versus absolute continuum. I have a little graph I'm going to try and share the screen here, if you will be patient with me. And I think you'll see here that we have a couple of small graphs here that can help us to understand a little bit. This is a pictorial version of what I consider to be Maturana's idea. Maturana didn't draw this graph, but I did. And it basically is saying that there is objectivity and there is subjectivity, and they're on a continuum. But objectivity, which is a claim outside of this continuum, represents a third, a triadic kind of frame. So truths can be objective or they can be subjective, but truths within communities are objective within the parentheses of social interaction. So the little parentheses around objectivity here represent the social group of influence. I extended this kind of thinking to talk about what I think is truth making, and I use the term bracketed absolute truth. And it's really not about absolute truth, which is down here, our relative truths, which is over here. Individuals can have their own truths. Here, there's absolute truth where it's indisputable for everyone. The truth claim is indisputable. And then you have bracketed absolute truth, which is a truth that is indisputable within its community. So the brackets represent the community of believers. So this, again, is triadic. Typically, you see critics operating down here. They're saying, well, it's an absolute truth or it's a relative truth. And I'm saying, no, there's a different position here, and it is triadic, and it's called bracketed truth. And what does that really mean? What does bracketed truth really mean? Here's another graph that shows that bracketed truth, this is the definition, these are the definitions of each of those terms. Bracketed truth is truth held as indisputable in a community. Then you have, you know, absolute truth, which is indisputable truth, that all people would come to agree. And then you have what you might call disputable truth, which for each individual can be his or her own truths. Now, how this applies to counseling and psychotherapy is that clients socially construct through past or present relationships truth claims. Truths for clients can be either constructive and relationship enhancing, or they can be destructive and relationship damaging. Counseling therapy should be all about healthy relationships and truth sharing that facilitates the health and survival of lifetimes. So when we hear our clients, we treat them differently than we would if we were doing classic psychological psychotherapy. We're going to listen to their stories about relationships and how those relationships have affected them, past and present. And people do horrible things to each other. There is no question when you listen to the compelling stories of our clients that sometimes horrible things have happened to them. And so we honor their stories through this method, and we understand that they've come to some truth claim in relationship with others in their past or in their present, and we help them to dispute or to develop different truth claims, competitive truth claims, that can allow them a healthier way of seeing the world. So, truth making is social, even decision making, and I've developed a decision making model, is taken out of the head, so to speak, and placed within the sphere of human interaction. Kenneth Gergen, social psychologist, made a very good case that knowledge is not in the head, that it's something that people do together interactively. So the truth claims of those who are with others, sometimes unethical truth claims, can be and typically are disputed within the professional ethical community. Decision making, rather than occurring in the head of the decision maker, occurs in the interactive process around which a decision is made. So codes of ethics are consensual documents that have stood the test of time, enduring through the vicissitudes of daily life. And ethical standards, of course, can change, but typically they change much slower than the politics of the day. The validity of any ethical standard lies in its enduring value to humanity or to its community. So radical social constructivism is all about understanding. It's about understanding through shared meaning. It rises above the psychology of the individual, and it acknowledges the biology of cognition while also acknowledging the social nature of language. So it's really biosocial, but it is not biopsychosocial. Biosocial rather than biopsychosocial. For those of you that have continued interest in this, I encourage you to read my book. I have a book that might be useful to you, and it is Toward a Positive Psychology of Religion. And it's a 2011 published book, and it's a good primer of radical social constructivism. So I encourage you to get this book, and it will give you both a summary of radical social constructivism, a nice primer on it, and it also talks about religion, which was the factor that was most convincing to me. So thank you for your interest, and I hope that you enjoyed my summary here.